The thumbnail of the video and the title is presented like this: Is Caitlin Clark the greatest of all time in college basketball? Clearly using Caitlin Clark's name to drive it, knowing that Caitlin Clark is the biggest needle mover. Not only is Caitlin Clark not even really on their list, she got removed from the list.
ESPN has once again shown blatant disrespect toward Caitlin Clark, continuing to push their biased narratives.
Can you be a top 5 player if you have not won a title?
Do you believe Larry Bird is an all-time great college player?
Yes.
Okay, well, he didn't win it, though.
Question.
They do leave Caitlin Clark out for the simple reason of not having a championship ring.
What about getting Iowa to the championship in back-to-back years? Is that not a...
Just when you thought they couldn't stoop any lower, they completely excluded Clark from their list of the top 5 greatest women's college basketball players of all time.
Only strike against Caitlin Clark is that she has not won a national championship. And that is the only thing that you can put against her.
Caitlin Clark took Iowa to back-to-back national championship games.
And their excuse? She doesn't have a championship. Really? The same network that ranks male players as legends, regardless of their title count, now suddenly decides that championships are the only thing that matters when it comes to Caitlin Clark?
But I do find it interesting that they do tout off all her accomplishments, records that have not been broken by anybody else, and they still cannot consider her in the top 5 best caliber.
We're not falling for their hypocrisy. In this video, we'll break down exactly how ESPN is actively diminishing Clark's legacy, playing favorites, and rewriting history to fit their agenda. Stay tuned as we expose their double standards, one by one.
I just don't understand how you can see someone doing more with less in some aspects, but in this one, you can't see it, you can't give them credit.
ESPN's bias was on full display when they conveniently erased Caitlin Clark from their all-time top 5 list for women's college basketball. Their reasoning? No championship ring. But here's the issue. This rule has never applied to any other players in their rankings. They've honored countless male and female athletes who never won a title. Yet suddenly with Caitlin Clark, championships are the only thing that matters.
Clark is being used as like a ploy. You know, they got to put Caitlin Clark's name in the title. They got to make sure, you know, you think you're watching something about Caitlin Clark, and then the rug is kind of pulled out when it's actually like, nah, she's not even in the top 5.
Take Oscar Robertson and Pete Maravich, 2 of the most celebrated college players in history. Neither of them ever won a national championship, yet ESPN had no issue ranking them among the greatest of all time. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark didn't just break records. She rewrote the history books while carrying her team to back-to-back national championship games.
If that's your number 1 criterion, if you don't win a championship, you can't be on any list, fine. She made the point that Caitlin has exploded the game bigger than anybody else. That's part of the significance, and I guess you could say the great.
The hypocrisy is staggering. If championships were the ultimate requirement, then why was the great Larry Bird, another college basketball icon without a title, ranked so highly on their lists? The truth is obvious. ESPN is holding Caitlin Clark to an entirely different standard.
Somebody who went to a team like Iowa, who did not have championship experience, who did not have stars around her. And it is undeniable that there is one player that brought Iowa to the championship that raised everybody else up around her, and their name is Caitlin.
And it gets worse. The way ESPN pulled this off wasn't just disrespectful, it was downright manipulative. They used Clark's name and face to promote the segment, knowing full well she's the biggest name in women's basketball.
Ranking players based on having a ring, a bit of an unfair way just to rank a player's potential.
They baited viewers into believing Clark would be honored alongside the greats, only to completely erase her from the list during the discussion. This wasn't just a debate. It was a calculated move to capitalize on her popularity while refusing to acknowledge her impact. ESPN is more than happy to exploit Clark's success for views, but when it's time to give her the respect she's earned, they suddenly change the criteria. Even their own analysts admitted on air that leaving Clark off felt wrong, acknowledging that she has dominated women's basketball like few ever have.
Here's the thing. Love Caitlyn. Love how she's transcended the game. I'm not going to go away from that. But in the Open, we said, what makes a top 5 player? Winning. The only strike against Caitlyn Clark is that she has not won a national championship. And that is the only thing that you can put against her, because the way she has dominated the record books when she was at Iowa was something you cannot duplicate. She's a 3-time NCAA scoring leader and assist leader, a true point guard for the people, 3-time All-American, 2-time Naismith Player of the Year, 2-time AP Player of the Year, all-time leading scorer. She broke the records of Kelsey Plum and Sabrina. Like, literally, there is nobody who has been such a front-facing name through a direct reflection of her skill set. But how can you be a top 5 player if you have not won a title?
It's a great point, which is why.
That's not impressive. Instead of standing by the truth, they clung to their tired argument, one that conveniently ignores how other great players without rings have been treated. ESPN is blatantly shifting the goalposts to downplay Caitlyn, Clark's greatness. They refuse to acknowledge her influence, even though she has done more for women's basketball than anyone in recent memory.
Anybody says, oh, she didn't win a championship, how do they respond back when you say, who else was on her team? What about getting Iowa to the championship in back-to-back years? Is that not
But why? If championships were the only thing that defined greatness, then why do individual awards exist? Basketball is a team sport. No single player wins a title on their own.
If you don't think that Caitlyn Clark is one of the top 5 basketball players of all time, but for the simple reason of not winning a championship, I do have to disagree. Championships are definitely a team recognition. They are something that a team does together and accomplish.
Clark didn't just dominate at Iowa. She shattered records, elevated the entire game, and took a team with no championship pedigree to back-to-back national title appearances. That alone should put her in the top 5, if not at number 1. ESPN conveniently ignored her unmatched individual stats. So let's talk about the numbers they don't want you to see.
Breanna Stewart, who's on this list, played at UConn with a bunch of other pros, a bunch of other WNBA players. Being a part of a stacked team at UConn or South Carolina and winning a national championship, is that more impressive than sticking with your little home school, not surrounded by great talent, and carrying them all the way to the brink of championships? What's more?
Caitlyn Clark holds the all-time scoring record in both men's and women's college basketball, and that alone cements her as one of the greatest players ever. But her impact goes far beyond scoring. She was also a dominant playmaker, consistently, leading in assists and elevating the performance of everyone around her. Simply put, she didn't just rack up points. She made her entire team better.
Breanna Stewart won a lot of championships, no question. Did she squad up with a bunch of future WNBA players? Obviously.
Her accolades speak for themselves. A 2-time AP Player of the Year, 3-time All-American, 2-time Naismith Player of the Year, and 2-time Wooden Award winner. In nearly every category that defines an all-time great, Clark ranks at, or near the top. Now let's compare this to the players ESPN ranked above her. Were they legendary in their own right? Absolutely. But did any of them revolutionize the sport the way Clark did?
Silly when you actually analytically and logically approach it for a second, it falls apart. Because who from those other lists could you put on the Iowa teams and they get the back-to-back championship?
Her records remain untouched. Her offensive skill set is unparalleled, and her influence on the game transcends mere stats.
There have always been the dominant teams. There is UConn, there is South Carolina. I think that the fact that Caitlyn Clark started on a team that did not have mind-blowing talent existing and brought that team to a championship really says something about you as a player. And when you are ranking players, you are ranking them as an individual unit rather than...
One of ESPN's biggest miscalculations is ignoring the fact that Clark accomplished more with less. Unlike players like Breanna Stewart, Cheryl Miller, and Maya Moore, who were surrounded by stacked rosters filled with All-Americans and future WNBA stars, Clark didn't have those same advantages. Iowa was never a powerhouse program. She didn't inherit a championship-caliber team. She built one.
A lot of times, you as an individual can really raise that team up and bring them to a championship. Breanna Stewart, who was ranked #1 in the top college basketball players of all time, but if she would have been on an Iowa team, would she have been able to win that championship also?
Take Breanna Stewart at UConn, for example. She played alongside multiple elite players, had the benefit of Hall of Fame coaching, and was part of an already dominant dynasty. Winning titles was expected. Now imagine if Clark had been in that system while Stewart played for Iowa. Would Stewart have carried that roster to consecutive national championship games the way Clark did? Highly unlikely. The same can be said for Cheryl Miller, who played at USC alongside future Hall of Famers.
The Mist, which is Breanna Stewart's team, is the second to worst team in Unrivaled. And Breanna Stewart, with her talent, with her just winning a championship WNBA ring on the Liberty, did not raise that team to any high level in Unrivaled herself.
Clark, on the other hand, was the sole reason Iowa even had a shot at competing for a title. Her leadership, vision, and ability to elevate a team turned a mid-tier program into a contender. That type of influence should matter far more than the number of trophies on the shelf.
And their ranking is that Breanna Stewart is the #1 best college basketball player of all time. The #2 best basketball player is Candace Parker. And then they have Diana Taurasi. And then they have Maya Moore. And then in that 5th slot, they slot in Cheryl Miller.
But Clark's greatness isn't just about what she did on the court. It's about how she changed the sport. And that's something ESPN conveniently ignored. Before Clark, women's college basketball wasn't pulling in record-breaking viewership. She changed that. She packed arenas, drove TV ratings to all-time highs, and skyrocketed merchandise sales. No other player in ESPN's rankings had this level of influence on the game. Clark didn't just dominate statistically, she made women's basketball more relevant than ever before. Even ESPN's own analysts admitted her impact was unparalleled, yet they still erased her from their rankings. That alone exposes their flawed reasoning.
Point guard in a season in WNBA history, most double-doubles by a rookie guard in WNBA history, most points by a rookie in WNBA history, most assists by a rookie in the history of the WNBA, first WNBA rookie to record 2 triple-doubles, first triple-double by a rookie in WNBA history, first triple-double in Fever history, the first player to be named WNBA Player of the Month and Rookie of the Month in the same month, first player in WNBA history with 20 or more points, 15 or more assists, and 5 or more rebounds in a game. She won Rookie of the Month 4 times, Eastern Conference Player of the Week 3 times, single-season rookie record for assists, single-season rookie record for three-pointers, single-game record for assists, 9.
And this brings us to the bigger issue, ESPN's clear bias. If Clark were any other player, there's no doubt she'd be treated differently. ESPN has repeatedly pushed narratives that downplay her success while elevating their chosen stars. It's not just about this ranking, it's a pattern of disrespect that's impossible to ignore. Take ESPN's reasoning for excluding her. She didn't win a championship. But as we've already pointed out, they have celebrated plenty of all-time greats who never won a college title. Pete Maravich, Oscar Robertson, and Larry Bird all failed to win a championship. Yet ESPN never questioned their place among the greats. But when it comes to Clark, suddenly the rules change.
Franchise record for most double-doubles, three-pointers, career 10 or more assists in a game. Franchise record for most career 10 or more assists in a game. Fastest WNBA player to reach 100 three-pointers. She did it in 34 games. Most assists by a rookie in a WNBA All-Star game, for which she received the most fan votes ever, 700,000 of those. Fastest player to reach 350 points and 150 assists to start a season, regardless of years in the league. People will say, pay more attention to the other folks. Like, she couldn't do it herself. You know, LeBron has teammates, Jordan had teammates.
This bias isn't just reflected in rankings. It's also evident in the way ESPN covers Clark compared to other players. They constantly hype up athletes like Angel Reese, Aja Wilson, and South Carolina's dynasty. Yet when Clark achieves something historic, they find a way to downplay it. When she set new records, ESPN barely acknowledged them. When she carried Iowa to back-to-back national title games, they shifted the focus to the teams that beat her instead. The double standard is even more blatant when it comes to controversies. When Angel Reese taunted Clark in the national championship game, ESPN rushed to defend her, calling it competitive fire. But when Clark displayed that same energy on the court, she was suddenly labeled as cocky or disrespectful. The inconsistency is undeniable, and it's not just about Reese. It's the way ESPN frames the entire conversation around Clark. When another player succeeds, ESPN spins it as a triumph against adversity. When Clark succeeds, they either ignore it or find a way to discredit it.
Association, they gave us a gym that I paid for, not entirely, but they took money out of my check and I paid for it.
You better get the full usage of that.
Man, I got hot tub, cold tub, weight room, full court basketball. Ron, I walk in today, I'm on one side working out, Caitlin Clark on the other side.
Really?
I look at myself, there you go too, Patty.
They've spent more time covering WNBA players who criticize Clark than actually celebrating her accomplishments. ESPN continuously pushes the narrative that she's overrated, despite all the statistical and financial evidence proving otherwise. At this point, it's obvious ESPN has an agenda when it comes to Caitlin Clark, and the more they try to diminish her, the more ridiculous they look.
You know I say what's up, but I'm not the type to say what's up to interrupt your workout because I don't like people to interrupt mine. She can shoot the shit out of it.
And the WNBA assist leader this past year.
She can shoot the shit out the ball.
She's a great shooter.
And she's one of those workout people, you know, got to think, anytime I hit the court, I got to hit that bike. I'm older now, so I got to get on that bike and stroll for a couple, 5, 6, 7 minutes. So while I'm strolling through the park, I'm looking at her shoot it. And she's one of those shooters where, if you know as a gym rat, you guys know, like, damn, bro, why you throw that pass bad? Give me the ball in my chest. I'm like, oh, she's a gangster also.
She's lighting people up.
Throw me the ball the way I want it.
What drill was it? What drill was she running?
I don't know. She was doing a 2 in a row corner wing. And if you miss, you have to go back to the next spot. And if you missed again, you have to go back to the starting spot. She had a nice drill. I'm literally still in it.
That's nice.
And she was shooting the shit out of it.
Of course she was.
Right. So she was shooting the shit out of it. And
she's the face of the league.
Agreed.
She's the face of the league. Agreed.
The reality is that Caitlin Clark is the biggest superstar women's basketball has ever seen, and ESPN knows it. They are fully aware that she's the reason behind record-breaking attendance figures. They understand that she's the driving force behind women's college basketball's historic TV ratings, and they recognize that she's why the WNBA is finally getting mainstream attention. Yet, they refuse to acknowledge her properly because doing so would contradict the narrative they've spent years crafting. ESPN has long positioned certain athletes as the faces of women's basketball, investing heavily in promoting their chosen stars. But Clark's rise has shattered that illusion. She didn't just enter the spotlight, she took it over. Recognizing her for what she truly is would mean admitting that she has surpassed the very players they've spent years hyping up. Rather than accept that, they try to downplay her influence, omit her from historic rankings, and pretend that her impact isn't as game-changing as it truly is.
What it do, peeps? Cheryl Swoops is been missing. Cheryl Swoops is MIA. They got a APB out for Cheryl Swoops. If you see Cheryl Swoops, she did a lot of talking a few months ago about the Indiana Fever, the locker room environment, how people didn't want to play there, how people wanted to leave.
But fans aren't fooled. They see what's happening. They see Clark's undeniable impact on the game, and they see ESPN twisting narratives to fit their agenda. No matter how hard the network tries to diminish her, the truth is impossible to ignore. Clark has transformed women's basketball in a way no player before her ever has. And that raises the bigger question. If ESPN is willing to manipulate history now, what will it take for them to finally give Clark the respect she deserves? At this point, ESPN can adjust rankings, shift goalposts, and spin the story however they like, but they can't erase reality. Caitlin Clark isn't just a great player. She's one of the greatest to ever step onto the court. Her influence extends beyond statistics. She brought millions of new fans into the sport and elevated women's basketball to a new level. No media bias or selective rankings can take that away from her.
the Indiana Fever are that golden destination, and I can't help but laugh to the fans and the people online who, and the media commentators, unfortunately, who said that nobody wanted to play in Indiana. That doesn't make any...
What's even more telling is that ESPN's refusal to acknowledge her properly only exposes their own priorities. They aren't interested in celebrating true greatness. They're focused on pushing narratives. They will continue protecting certain players while downplaying others, ignoring the fact that Clark has done more to grow the game than anyone in recent history. But here's what ESPN doesn't realize. Fans don't need their approval. Clark's legacy isn't defined by manipulated rankings or cherry-picked talking points. It's defined by her records, her influence, and the millions of people who have rallied behind her. Years from now, history won't remember ESPN's rankings. It will remember the undeniable truth of what Caitlin Clark accomplished. So let ESPN continue their games, because while they're busy rewriting history, Clark is out here making it, and the world is watching.